Hey y'all, Boogie Night here, and after mucking through the Inferno and the Purgatorio, I can finally say that Virgil and Dante, that is Morges and myself, have finally reached the Paradiso in the Christploitation Trilogy. Now, I know what you're thinking right now, my god, Boogie Night. After giving so much vitriol to God's Not Dead 2 and Kirk Cameron's Saving Christmas, what Christploitation movie did you unearth that you can actually call paradise compared to the other two? Well, I wouldn't exactly call it a Christploitation film or even a religious film in general. It's more like the biggest slap in the face to the Christploitation film industry. And I'm talking about a movie that I have brought up on numerous occasions since early May when I started the Christploitation Trilogy. And that is a movie called Jesus Bro. Now, before I get started on this, just to quell the internet nigerians of the fundy religious sort, I have no problem with religious films. I have a big problem with religious exploitation films. What's the difference, you might ask? Quite simply, the religious movies that I have seen to date, which are quite a few of them, and also let the truth be known, I have seen them voluntarily, whether I was on a date, whether alcohol was promised, or whether it was my own morbid curiosity, which has been a lot more recently. And those religious movies have put Christianity, not even a specific type of Christianity, but more of a just non-denominational, very right-wing fundamentalist Christian group as either the victim, that they are the ones at fault and they are being prosecuted by any other religion, whether it be other groups of Christianity or Judaism, Buddhism, atheists, blah, 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 blah. That's beside the point. Or pits them as the one true religion, and all other religions that are not this fundamentalist Christianity sect, cult, whatever you want to call it, is wrong, and you're going to burn in the fires of hell unless you convert. That is what I see as a Christploitation flick versus an actual religious movie. But once again, that's just me and my own personal opinion. I've been raised Catholic, I went to a Jesuit university, I have no problem with any kind of religion as long as you're not hurting yourself or hurting others. I am pro-human, and I will be willing to give a third party at a glance of any other religion just for my own curiosity's sake. But if you start putting yourself as a victim or as the one true faith, no matter what you are, you will earn my ire. And thanks be to Godfrey, this movie completely just took any kind of Christploitation film, took it out back behind the woodshed, beat it within an inch of its life with a hose, and left it out to dry and rot in the sun for eternity. Okay, that was really kind of graphic. I apologize. Sorry, y'all. It's been a very long week. I am exhausted. But anyway, so before I go into talking about the plot and whatnot, let me talk a little bit more about the background of Jesus Bro. It was directed by Ryan Mitchell, who you might know as being part of the Cinema Snob and the Midnight Screenings crew and all that. He's also directed several other films from the Cinema Snob movie, Freak Out, which was loosely based on Dean Corll, aka the Candyman serial killer, Paranoia. I think he also directed Hooker with the Heart of Gold, but I've been wrong before. And once again, if you're familiar with Cinema Snob and Midnight Screenings, you'll be very familiar with the cast of characters and the actors and actresses. Obviously, Brad Jones, the Cinema Snob, plays a minor role. Alison Pregler, aka Obscurus Lupa, and she's part of Phalis. You should also check out his channel, Phelan Porteous. She's in it. Of course, you have Sarah Gobble, formerly Sarah Lewis, who is always a big part of the Midnight Screenings crew. You have Doug Walker, aka the Nostalgia Critic, and you should probably watch him as well on Channel Awesome, and his brother Rob Walker, and there's some other characters throughout that. Brian Lewis is in it, but the main character is played by one Dave Gobble. Now, Dave has always been kind of Brad's co-host for most of the politically charged or religious movies, and Dave is an outspoken atheist. I don't have a problem with that. I agree with some of his views. I disagree with some of his views. That doesn't make me think of him any less as a commentator, and in this movie, as one of my new favorite actors. I think he has done a fantastic job throughout this whole, from beginning to end, and all the little other points in between. So once again, if you like the Cinema Snob, if you like the Midnight Screenings card, even if you don't agree with the premise of this movie or the plot, you should check it out for yourself. I bought the DVD because I'm a whore like that, but you can also rent it or buy it on Vimeo.com for a few bucks. It's dirt cheap. So I keep talking about how this is a slap in the face to Christploitation movies. I lost count on how many religious movies this film just sucker punched across the board. I actually made a list throughout this movie with more guesses' help on a lot of them, and taking a quick look at this, here's from what I've gathered, all the movies that they just completely just poked at. Heaven is for Real, God's Not Dead 1 and 2, Miracles from Heaven, Second Glance, of course Kirk Cameron Saving Christmas, how could you not take a pot shot at that? Any movie done by David Ayer White and Pure Flix, Old Fashioned, War Room, The Identical, which wasn't really a religious movie, but they still poked fun at it. The Left Behind series, of course, how could you miss that turd monkey? And other non-religious movies like Dogma, of course. Lion King, a little pot shot at that. Aladdin, of course. Little pot shot at that. You gotta poke fun at Disney movies. Come on. You gotta have a little bit of fun. And at the very end, Return of the Jedi. I wish I was making all that up, but take a moment to just wrap your head around that. So let's begin. Dave Gobble plays a character known as the Rickhead. And after kind of a little opening scene of him as a kid and meeting somebody who he thinks is Jesus but is actually just a drunken moron, it goes into him being the most famous and prolific atheist internet commentator. And he talks about just how God doesn't exist, God's dead, blah, 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 blah. How it's pretty much just vehemently, if it's religious, he is against it. I mean, this guy makes some of my bleeding heart atheist friends look like Puritans. And of course, I mean, it's obviously played up for laughs. It's played up because he's making fun of religious movies. But he does it well, and his tagline is, I say it because you think it. Which, at opening thought, I'm thinking he's kind of using that as a potshot towards the nostalgia critic, since his tagline is, I remember it so you don't have to. But he goes into just saying stuff like, and it gets really just goofy kind of out of the gate. He talks about how Christ Chicken is closed on Sundays, which of course is a pot shot at Chick-fil-A, because it's owned by religious people. How he's like, should I just give up eating on Sundays? It's my favorite restaurant. Anyway, so he goes through about a few minutes of exposition talking about him being an atheist and how he doesn't believe in God and so on and so forth. And then you meet Carlos, played by his buddy Fard. I forget his last name, I apologize. And at this point, it's almost very much like God's Not Dead, because it's really a shenanigans thing, because just the goofiness between Carlos and the Rickhead and just the antics they get into throughout the movie, it's so reminiscent of David Ayer White and his missionary priest friend. And Morgus and I have talked about how just goofy it is. I mean, I want to see a spin-off of just shenanigans between the Rickhead and Carlos, or just Carlos being himself. So you find out later on in the movie, of course, that Carlos is religious, but he's very good friends with the Rickhead just because he is a nice guy. They get along together, and like all good Christians, their words not mine, they like to drink and shoot stuff. So they go hunting for a little bit, and they chase after what can only be described as a moving bush. Yeah, I know. You feel like that's a Benny Hill scene. In fact, that was actually something Morgus made up. So while Carlos is chasing after this running bush all over the place, Rickhead gets a call from, I think his name was Samuel or something like that. And Samuel says, well, because you are the most famous atheist, we want to give you an award for being Atheist of the Year. Good for him. Anyway, so he wants to invite his girlfriend, played by Obscurus Lupa, Alison Pregler, and they go to dinner, they talk about a little bit, and of course the Rickhead, of course being the blatant asshole that he is, which is once again played up for laughs because a lot of Christploitation movies view atheists as being these pompous dickheads, and the Rickhead, dickhead, there you go, is of course no exception to the rule. And he starts talking about how he has a very important bit of news to tell her, and she thinks he's going to propose to him, or he's going to propose to her, excuse me, when he just says flat out, including the point that he pulls out a ring box opens it, and it's a pin to the ball where he gets to be named Atheist of the Year. And then you find out she's religious, and the only reason why she wanted to stay with him was because she had a top 5, and he was 4 out of 5. And, of course, the 5th one being in question was the fact he is not religious. She breaks up with him. He, of course, is very torn up about this, and he starts talking to Carlos at a bar, hammered out of his mind, about how he wants to get her back. He would do anything to get her back. He drinks a new beer that apparently is flavored with holy water, much to his complete chagrin, and he passes out and has a near-death experience. Now, this is when the movie starts to take off and really start making pot shots. He meets up with the spirit or the incarnation of Jesus or something like that, and Jesus is dressed up as Santa Claus. So there you go, 2 mythical things in one area. Jesus and Santa Claus. Once again, I don't think Jesus is a myth, but I don't have enough evidence to prove or disprove otherwise. That is completely above my pay grade. That's why they call it faith. So, after much hemming and hawing to prove that Jesus actually does exist, and by hemming and hawing, I mean he starts doing electroshock stuff out of his fingers to shock the Rickhead. And he basically makes an agreement with him to say that if he starts converting people to Christianity because Jesus' followers and conversion rates are completely in the crapper, which almost sounds like, once again, trying to get views, kind of like TV and ratings and everything like that, Rickhead will get Elizabeth back, which I find very interesting because is the Rickhead just doing this to get Elizabeth back? Or is he doing it completely because he actually saw Jesus and now has evidence, tangible evidence, that Jesus exists, even though this is a near-death experience and so on and so forth? So he wakes up wearing some sort of bedsheet, kind of like a toga, and Carlos is there, obviously. And to figure out if he really did meet Jesus, he and Carlos go to meet up with Burton something or other, who also apparently had a near-death experience and had a vision of Jesus, except Jesus was a chicken sandwich, which I think was pretty much also a pot shot at Chick-fil-A, because there you go, running gags. But he wrote a book about his experience called, I kid you not, the book is called Jesus is Totes Real, Yo. Come on, you gotta laugh a little bit about that. Obviously, it's a blatant slap in the face to, like, Heaven's for Real or God's Not Dead or anything like that. But they talk about their own religious experiences, so to speak. And in order to find out more about Jesus, the Rickhead reads the entire Bible cover to cover. And there's little vignettes of him trying to read and trying to understand it. But he goes from being this blatant atheist with millions of subscribers and viewers to being this heartfelt Christian, talking about how he's a believer now, he believes in Jesus, kind of like Simon Ben Judah did in the Left Behind series. And I can't believe I remembered that scene, because I don't think I've read those books since middle school. And by all those books, I mean only 3 of them. Do you really think I would pick up those books? If you saw my library right now, I don't think I have a single religious book on that shelf. No offense. But of course, going from one extreme to the other, he's going to make himself a lot of enemies. So of course, people start unsubbing him, people start downvoting him, to the point that Samuel, the atheist guy, comes back and says, you know what, because you're religious now, I not only downvoted you, I'm revoking your award that you won for being best atheist. So of course, with all this turmoil, the Rickhead's pretty much beside himself, thinking that he can make instant fame just because he was switching from one extreme to the other. And of course, this was also the part I think I laughed the hardest about, because he and Carlos had their Kirk Cameron Saving Christmas moment, that they literally hold their coffee mugs in front of their mouths while they have this deep discussion about how they think he's being tested, about he thinks Santa Christ is putting him to the test, how he thinks that he should have gotten Elizabeth back just because he's doing all this. And of course, Carlos is saying, you know what, dude? You should probably think a little bit harder. So throughout that, they decide that he wants to meet Santa Christ again. So they go back to the bar. He tries to get the same beer he had that knocked him out, so he met Jesus. Instead, he drinks another beer. I think this one was called Hellschlager and had a picture of the devil on it, whereas the religious beer he drank to make him see Jesus was called You've Lost That Lager Feeling. Come on. You gotta remember that old song from the 70s and 80s, You've Lost That Loving Feeling. I really am dating myself. Anyways, instead of meeting up with Jesus, he meets up with the devil, and I gotta say right out of the gate, man, the suit the devil was wearing was amazing. I want that suit. I want the tie. I want the shirt. Yes, I know. I'm more focused on the suit than the plot. I like suits, alright? Almost as much as I like trophies. Anyway, after much discussion and the devil trying to, trick the Rickhead into going into the lake of fire or the river of fire, into hell and all that stuff, he tells the Rickhead that he wants to get more conversions to Jesus. Because the people that don't convert to Jesus, when they die, they go down to hell. So it's a win-win situation. The believers go to heaven, the non-believers go to hell. Once again, big slap in the face to the Christploitation industry. Because how many times in a religious movie have you heard that? How many times have I talked about it? How many times are you getting bored hearing me talk about this? Anyway, he gets sent back with broken knees this time, mainly because apparently when he was passed out at the bar, the atheist Samuel came back and had his two goons, Ned and Stacy. Yeah, there's a Ned and Stacy reference. Hilarious. Also a really awful 90s TV show back in the day. So they go to meet up with the Rickhead's brother. I totally forget his name. More exposition dump, but he talks about how he converted to Christianity, and Christianity made him no longer homosexual, no longer have any kind of evil thoughts, which I found hilarious. I almost spit out my water when he's like, I'm no longer into men anymore. I'm no longer into this, blah, blah, blah. To the point he got engaged to some spiritual crazy woman, and like an old-fashioned, they're not even going to be in the same state with each other until they tie the noose. Not, whatever. They're going to get married in the four corners. Anyway, I digress. Long story short, Rickhead's brother talks about how, in order to combat the forces of evil, he has a little secret he wants to show them. So he opens up his closet, and there it is. His own personal war room. Oh yeah, And this was a blatant concept to the movie War Room. It's right down there to the pictures on the wall, how you need to pray to overcome certain obstacles. And I'm not telling you guys to go out and watch War Room. God, no, please don't do that. Don't subject yourself to that form of torture and anguish. Pray to it. Pop in the movie Platoon and watch this movie, and pray until your prayers come true. Hey, why not? I worked in War Room. I gave the guy food poisoning, all the other stuff, so why not work for the Rickhead? So the Rickhead does that and prays that he gets more conversions to Christianity, and basically that his enemies fail, and then it happens. The people that downvote his pieces on social media and on YouTube or whatever website he uses, no website's been talked about, obviously for copyright's sake, spontaneously combust. And there's even a couple of scenes where you see Irving, obviously one of the other Midnight Screenings crew, is about to downvote, and he spontaneously combusts in front of, well, the viewers. So Carlos talks about this. He's like, dude, you are on fire. No pun intended. But now you're really gonna get conversions because people are scared out of their minds that they don't want to blow up and go down to hell. Cut to another scene later on after all this happens that Elizabeth shows up and apologizes to him in front of a live camera, and you find out more about what happened after they broke up. A couple of days ago, she married some lawyer person. She had 19 kids. I know, and within a couple of days, once again, big potshot of religion, so good on you guys. I'm happy about that. She's doing her own reality show about having her 19 kids because her words, not mine. Why the hell not? Which I find hilarious because that makes fun of reality TV, which I find is the biggest shit stain on the face of modern television. but that's off the rails for a later day. And he actually goes point blank to tell her he became religious just to win her back. Smooth move, X-Lax. So of course that pissed her off, and she storms off in a huff. So he basically is in a deep funk, not really sure where to go next. And then Samuel's brother, also played by Doug Walker, basically the religious counterpart to him, wants to sign the Rickhead up to do all sorts of religious movies. I'm pretty sure this is a pot shot at Kirk Cameron and David Ayer White, but I could be wrong. But having all this stuff apparently scared the living daylights out of God out of Santa, Christ, Jesus, and the devil. So they pull him back to the weird little limbo. He meets with both of them, and they basically say that, you know what, we knew you weren't going to win Elizabeth back anyway. The only reason we wanted you to convert all these people to Christianity was because the devil and I made a bet with each other. Pod shot to something that happened in the book of Job, probably the most depressing book in the Bible, next to Revelations, except a lot less exciting. And the only way to counteract all this is to not have a heart-to-heart or reverse anything or whatever. They start the rapture. I don't know how that really happens when you merely converting people, but I'm overanalyzing the situation. And of course, Carlos and Elizabeth are stuck on Earth for reasons I don't know why, despite the fact they're both religious. And then, of course, Rick gets pissed off as all holy hell, no pun intended, about this. And then you see a door open and you see a bright shining light, which gives rise to the appearance of God. Of course, Devil disappears and basically says, like, oh God, I'm going to get crucified again. First time was bad enough. I don't want this to happen again. And basically tells the Rickhead to take the fall, even though it's going to get him smited and wind up down in hell. And the Rickhead does this on one condition, that Carlos and Elizabeth, no, just Elizabeth, survive the rapture, survive the tribulation period, which once again is not listed anywhere in the Bible. There's nothing that all says anything literally about the rapture. It can be interpreted about that, but in what I have studied, there is nothing saying directly of the rapture in the translations I've looked at. It is a man-made thing. It is complete bullshit in my opinion, but once again, above my pay grade. So Jesus, Santa Christ, promises this to the Rickhead, and in walks God, played by Sarah Gobble, Dave Gobble's very pregnant wife. I think she was probably 6 or 7 months along at this time. And, of course, that was a Dogma reference right there. He explains it to her, and her words, not mine, was, well, I'm not in an Old Testament kind of mood right now. I am actually going to switch back time to before all this happened, and wipe your memory clean and get a fresh start. So of course he kind of takes, I wouldn't say offense to it, but he's like, but I'm going to be an atheist, and that's not what you want. And she goes, it's not about being an atheist or believing in something, it's about being a good person. And of course that was the moral that I always follow, and that's actually something I've done in a lot of my fictional stories. Whether you're religious or not, it doesn't matter as long as you are a good person, as long as you're not hurting yourself or hurting other people. I've seen atheists with hearts of gold. I've seen religious people that are complete douche canoes and using it for exploitation purposes. And I don't think those people are sitting beyond the pearly gates and going, yes, yes, we are the chosen ones, going back to exploitation. Anyway, she turns back time and reverse back to when he's having dinner with Elizabeth before all this goes down. Once again, second glance reference. But throughout all this, before he starts talking about his own atheist and selfish reasons and drive to be the best atheist possible, Santa Christ and God give him all his memories back about what happens. And he does this complete 180 to the point he actually tells her everything that he's learned throughout this process about how he's not sure if God exists, he's not sure about this, but he wants to be her 5 out of 5. Of course, it scares the shit out of her because she's never told him that this was a 5 out of 5 thing, and he proposes to her. So, of course, they have a big happy wedding, happy ending, and then it cuts to the credits. Oh, but before the credits, he sees a vision of Santa Christ and God and his dead brother. And they're showing up like the force of Obi-Wan, Yoda, and then Anakin at the very end, which I found hilarious, but that's the movie in a nutshell. It's only 85 minutes. I don't think my explanations have done this justice, other than the fact that it makes fun of religious movies. I think it does it very well. I think it does it in a tongue-in-cheek format. I think it sets the message that Sarah gives at the very end, a very well done thing, and I think it's something that you all need to check out. I think Ryan was a great director. I think he's honed his craft fantastically from Freak Out and any other independent movies he's done back then until now. And overall, I give this movie a 7 out of 10. I think obviously there were some cinematography flaws and maybe some acting bits that could have been fleshed out, and I think maybe some of the Christploitation bits could have maybe been fleshed out a little bit for the people that aren't as familiar with religious movies. They might have understood a little bit more, but the acting was very good between Elizabeth, between the Rickhead, Carlos, the roles that Doug Walker played, Devil, Jesus, the brief appearance of God. It actually sounds like a really bad 80s song as well. I think it was very well done. So once again, check it out. Check it out on Vimeo. If you like it, buy the DVD. But with that being said, here ends the Christploitation Trilogy, as it's at the end of every book in the Divine Comedy, as under the stars, the shining stars. I hope you like this. I've got another mini arc coming up starting next week in the month of July. Hope you guys stick around for that. Let me know what you think, as always, in the comments below. But with that being said, y'all have a wonderful evening, and I'll catch you on the flip side, alright? Peace.